Often, in a true war story, there's not even a point, or else the point doesn't hit you until 20 years later in your sleep, and you wake up and shake your wife and start telling the story to her. Except, when you get to the end, you've forgotten the point again, and then for a long time you lie there watching the story happen in your head. You listen to your wife's breathing. The war is over. You close your eyes, you take a feeble swipe at the dark, and think, what's the point?
Tim O'Brien, The Things They Carried. Good morning. Welcome to Semiahmoo Secondary School's Remembrance Day Ceremony. To begin, we would like to acknowledge that Semiahmoo Secondary is situated on the traditional, unceded territory of the Coast Salish people, and we are proud of our relationship with the Semiahmoo First Nation. Today, Daniel Morris and I, Jan Pang, will be your student presenters for this year's Remembrance Day ceremony. We want to take a moment to remind you that this ceremony calls for maturity and decorum. We ask that you remain quiet throughout today's proceedings and refrain from applauding, shouting, or cheering. We would like to introduce Mr. Renew, our school principal.
Why we remember. Today we commemorate Remembrance Day. Today you'll hear about the significance of this date and the number 11. You'll hear that at the beginning of World War I, there was a real appetite for warfare. Young were actually eager to sign up and go to battle. Families romanticized war and saw it as sweet and appropriate to die for their country. By the end of World War I, however, the world's population knew different. Millions of young men died in the battlefield, many of them knee-deep in muddy trenches. When the peace treaty was signed, they called World War I the war to end all wars. Little did they know that millions more young men would be sent to their deaths in World War II, little more than 20 years later. Almost a century later, we have yet to see a war that ends all wars. Of course, today is not the official Remembrance Day, that's tomorrow. It's a day off school, a day off work for many people. We encourage you to reflect then, as we hope you will during the assembly today, that this is a day of mourning. It is a funeral. It's a day to reflect on the many young lives that were sacrificed. It is also a day for conflicted emotions. Some participants feel deeply saddened at loss, while others are angered at the futility of war. Some feel great pride for those who sacrificed themselves, while others feel ashamed that we could actually ask such a thing of our younger generation. As we move forward, we as human beings need to find a way to resolve our differences without resorting to violence and armed conflict. 100 years ago, this was a wish of that generation. Today, it's a wish of my generation. I truly hope this becomes one of the truths that define your generation, lest we forget.
Thank you, Mr. Renew.
Your respect for the meaning of this ceremony and for those we commemorate today is demonstrated by your silence. I would now ask that you rise for the singing of our national anthem. Thank you. Please be seated.
We were the forgotten, of the lest we forget. We were the invisible, ghosts from the res. We had no obligation to join. We had to give up our treaty status. We fought, we died. Our language was used for secret messages. We stood side by side with other soldiers in our victory. We were cast aside when we came back home. We didn't get the benefits allotted other veterans. We didn't know where to live since we gave up our treaty status. We were the forgotten. Of the lest we forget. We were the invisible, ghosts from the rest.
Thank you. You are in a storm, ridden with injustices, where everyone else is close, yet so far away from you. Lightning deafens you, rain blinds you, and the harsh winds choke your cries for help. It's suffocating. It's unfair. And it's more real than any nightmare. Its very tangibility weighs tenfold.
These images aren't pleasant, and it's even less pleasant when you're in the center. But this negative headspace is something that we may all find our way into. We may all experience feeling damaged by life's storms. This mental struggle will hurt, no matter how severe it is, but we're here today to honor and remember the veterans who were put in the middle of the storm and were consumed by it. War is a place where nothing is fair, and all your loved ones are so far away from you. The artillery deafens you, the shrapnel blinds you, and the borders of the battlefield leave your cries for help on deaf ears.
No one wants to be in this storm. No one wants to be damaged beyond repair. But these soldiers paid that price for us.
In many wars, the contents of letters are censored to keep them from revealing valuable information. But as they censored these letters for classified information, they also censored the cries for help as well. People who were suffering and wanted their struggle to be known. In World War I, for example, the lieutenant would have to be the storm for his own men, making sure their experiences would not be heard and leaving their unheard words swirling in a festering storm inside of them. Damaged beyond repair, and a war inside their mind that they couldn't even begin to describe to their mothers or fathers. As unfair as it was, some letters did pass by censorship, and these letters hold more truth than any propaganda or censored letter ever could.
Imagine that letter, and what might have been written in it if censorship had not concealed those words.
February 14th, 1915.
My darling and loving wife, Emily. It is Valentine's Day, and my thoughts are with you as always. I wish that I could be with you on this special day of love.
Instead of being here in this hellhole which Belgium has become, raw sewage from the open cesspit, body odor from
Men who haven't had a decent wash for weeks.
dead bodies rotting in shallow graves and laying out in the open in no man's land, the smell of exploded bombs and the odor of mustard gas which lingers for a few days after the attack. Stagnant mud,
Cigarette smoke and cooking smells.
all add to the unpleasantness of the trenches.
They say that we will get used to the smell over time, but it feels like it will never leave us at the moment. Sleep is so hard to come by.
The constant booming and banging of shells from both sides,
My bed is a bunk.
which has been placed in a dugout section of the trench. A mud roof, a mud floor, and the constant threat of a stray shell keeps me awake at night. I'm scared.
My darling Emily.
My life is under constant threat. Bullets randomly fired at us. Shells exploding every minute of the day. Men are dying all around me, if not from a stray bullet or shell. They are falling with fever and disease.
4 of the boys in my squad.
I've already died.
They went through basic training with me, and I consider them good friends.
My best friend John shot himself in the foot just to get out of here, away from the trenches. He will be treated in a field hospital and sent home. It is barbaric and a futile waste of human life, but the powers that be seem to think that this is the way forward and keep sending those men and boys to their deaths.
I will close now and pray that this is not the last letter that I will ever send you, my darling. I long to be back at home with you and the children.
I love you with all of my heart.
Happy Valentine's Day. Your ever-loving husband.
George.
Oftentimes, we do not say what hurts us the most, and we may never know what these soldiers truly felt inside as they talked about love and home life, while the popping of gunfire and stench of death swirled around them. Truth is hidden within them even when they return home. Sebastian Younger, a war reporter, has seen war up close, and he knows the impact that battlefield trauma has on soldiers. In his TED Talks, he has said that
Brotherhood is a mutual agreement in a group that you will put the welfare of the group. You will put the safety of everyone in that group above your own. In effect, you're saying, I love these people more than I love myself. Yeah. This was about a year before 9/11, and America wasn't at war yet. We weren't talking about PTSD. We were not yet talking about the effect of war on the human psyche. I'd been in Afghanistan for a couple of months with the Northern Alliance as they were fighting the Taliban. And at that point, the Taliban had an air force, they had fighter planes, they had tanks, they had artillery, and we really got hammered pretty badly a couple of times. We saw some very ugly things, but I didn't think it affected me. I didn't think much about it. I came home to New York, where I live. Then one day, I went down to the subway, and for the first time in my life, I knew real fear. I had a massive panic attack. I was way more scared than I had ever been in Afghanistan. Everything I was looking at seemed like it was going to kill me, but I couldn't explain why. Trains were going too fast. There were too many people. The lights were too bright. Everything was too loud. Everything was moving too quickly. I backed up against a support column and just waited for it. When I couldn't take it any longer, I ran out of the subway and walked wherever I was going.
later, Younger found out that what he had was short-term PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. He says that you want to be angry because it makes you predisposed to fight, or depressed because it keeps you out of circulation a little bit, keeps you safe. It's not very pleasant, but it's better than getting eaten. Eaten by the storm that encapsulates you, inescapable, relentless, present. Disabled, Wilfred Owen.
And soon, he was drafted out with drums and cheers. Some cheered him home, but not as crowds cheer goal. Only a solemn man who brought him fruits thanked him, and then inquired about his soul.
Be that person to inquire about his soul. Check in with your friends and family. We may not have been to war, but everyone has little storms looming above their heads, or facing an internal battle well concealed from the outside. There urges a stronger emphasis to take care of your well-being. Contribute to the strong support network, both in our school and community, offering a break in that storm. On this solemn day, within this sacred hour, once more we pause. Once more we remember. We are gathered here to remember the lives lost in our darkest hours. We remember the sacrifices made by men and women as they marched onto the battlefields of war, into an emotional turmoil of an everlasting storm. Yet, how does that poppy still survive in the storm? It is strength. Wearing poppies today is a sign of respect to acknowledge those who are so strong, and for us to continue this strength. Remembering is part of healing. Glimmers of hope in a storm, little rays of sunshine, the calming of the winds. The last post marks the end of a soldier's day. It pays tribute to the lost, the fallen, and the dead. It is followed by a minute of silent reflection and by the reveille, which signifies the new beginnings each day brings. As we listen to the last post, we bow our heads and pay our respects to those who have given their lives for our freedom. Please stand and remain standing silently until you are asked to be seated. Please be seated.
As we come together today and reflect on any storms which may be brewing in our hearts, may we never forget the storms inside of those who've served. Our peace came with sacrifice.
For some, it was the last sacrifice they ever made. May we all hold our poppies close to our hearts.
This brings a close to our Remembrance Day ceremony. We would like to thank our student speakers Cole Elgert and Elizabeth Cocatello.
Thank you for your respectful behavior during the solemn ceremony. Please be patient, remain seated, and wait for directions from your teacher. The procession of the Piper will start shortly.